Welcome, Alan, to the show. You got this huge sports background. And for those of you who are listening audio, which is the majority of our audience, you can't see his background, but he's got all these cool sports photos. So why don't we start out, introduce yourself to the audience, let them know about your background, what you're doing today. And this is going to be really valuable for everybody. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I am as well. This is going to be a fun conversation. Well, I am Alan Stein Jr., and I spent most of my professional career as a basketball performance coach. And basketball was my first identifiable passion. I fell in love with the game at 5 years old, and I'm eternally grateful that here 40 years later, basketball is still a major pillar of my life. And, as a basketball performance coach, I was responsible for helping players improve their on-court athleticism and bulletproofing their body against injury. And I had an opportunity to work at two different high schools here in the Washington, D.C. area that have produced over a dozen players currently playing in the NBA, the most notable of which is Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets. And then that led to work with Nike, with Jordan Brand, with USA Basketball. And I had an opportunity to work with and work alongside guys like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Kyrie Irving, Steve Nash. So I've had a really unique journey where I've gotten to see both sides of the curtain, what it takes for someone to raise their game and reach optimal performance, but then what it takes for them to sustain there and stay atop of that mountain, if you will. So I now take all of these lessons and strategies that I learned through the game of basketball, through these elite level players and coaches, and I translate those through my books and through keynote presentations and show folks how they can apply the exact same strategies, rituals, and routines to the business world or to any area of their life.
Yeah, I really love it. And, I noticed one thing you do that at least came across unique to me is how you help people focus on this short, intermediate or near, current situation, and long-term timelines is what you talked about. And I think that a lot of people, I think everybody's a leader, not just people who have a leadership title, but I think a lot of people just don't understand timelines and good intentions, but can't do that. There's another urgent, I got to go fight this fire type of thing. But I don't know whether that's where you want to go today, but I am curious about that piece of your puzzle because it really sounds unique. And what do you want to explain to us regarding that?
No, I would love to dive in there. I think that's a wonderful place to start. And let me say, as far as both of my books are concerned, Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, each of those books were written based on what it was that I was going through and experiencing in my own life. And both of those books were written because they were kind of the books that I needed to be reading, so I try and write what it is I'm experiencing and write what I believe can help get me to the next level. And then I certainly hope that I'm doing that in service of the audience and anyone that invests in it. So for me, I have found this constant struggle and this constant challenge between jockeying in and out of short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And what I found was there were three areas that were really undermining not only my performance, but my sense of joy and fulfillment. And that was stress. And that's what happens on the day-to-day, in the short term. That was stagnation, kind of the mental cruise control that we have the tendency to put on in that midterm. And then burnout, which is something that once we've been at it for a little while can start to rear its ugly head. So I find that I was kind of looping in and out of those three different timelines consistently. So I wanted to find the best ways to overcome them.
Yeah. So what's the, is it just kind of grouping where I'm putting my energy in or where I'm focusing into, what needs to happen in the short term? What is the short term, intermediate, and long term?
What I think is important to do, and I actually kind of came to this conclusion one time when I was on a flight, so I was flying to Dallas and I was looking out the window, and, when you're looking out the window of an airplane, everything you see is miniature. I mean, even the biggest buildings and houses and roads, they appear so small. And I realized that from that vantage point, I could pretty much see everything. I mean, I saw houses, buildings, cars. I mean, people looked like ants. I could see everything, but I couldn't really see any detail. I certainly couldn't see the expression on somebody's face, and I certainly couldn't read a license plate on a car, but I could have a massive macro overview. Then when I landed and I, got my Uber and went to my hotel, I noticed that from that vantage point, I couldn't see very far. I couldn't see very much. I could only see what was in front of me and in my peripheral. but I could see unbelievable detail. I could then see the smiles on somebody's faces or license plates on a car. And I realized that as a leader and to be a high performer in any area of life, you need to be able to have both vantage points, and you need to be able to look from both vantage points, at the flip of a switch. On one level, we have to be able to step back and say, okay, how am I managing stress? How am I avoiding stagnation? And how am I beating burnout? Looking at the big picture. But then you need to figure out which of those things are most pressing for you at the moment, and then drill down and be very hyper-focused and specific, and then pay most close attention, to which one of those things is ailing you most.
So how often am I going to ask myself that, or kind of challenge myself in that way?
Some of it's just on feel. And that's, when I was in the basketball performance space, one of the things we talked about incessantly was, coaching is both an art and a science. We can certainly look at some common traits of the best leaders that we've ever seen. And we could probably break down some research that says certain ways of approaching the coaching profession are most likely more effective than others. But at the end of the day, it's also rather subjective, and it's individualistic, and it's customized, that you have to have a feel for the people that you're leading and the people that you're coaching and pouring into, that it's not this prescribed one size fits all. And it's the same thing with this. Each and every person listening to this right now needs to kind of get familiar with what causes stress, stagnation, and burnout, and constantly go back and forth from the close view to the far view, and then have a feel for what's ailing me most now, what deserves my attention most at present. And sometimes it's focusing on, a couple of these things at the same time.
So give me a for instance. So one of the things that I try to do is once a week, I try to take what I call sanctuary time, where I hold myself accountable. Basically, did I get the stuff done I wanted to get done this past week? What are the current things I need to consider? What's my plan for the upcoming week? So, and then I try to do a short version of that daily, start of the day, end of the day, just real short. So can you walk me through maybe one of your clients or yourself, your experience, whatever it is, where what this looks like with these different, because you said, if I remember, you said timelines. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, where does the timeline come in as I'm considering these different short, immediate, and long-term timelines?
Sure. No, and I love your approach. I do something very similar as far as diving a little bit deeper on my week's view, but then doing a quick summary and recap and debrief on a daily view. And it's kind of a similar mindset to that. Generally speaking, stress is only experienced in the present moment. We can think about things that have happened in the past, and we can certainly worry about or get anxious about things that may or may not happen in the future. But stress really only happens in the day to day. So, as far as our ability to manage stress, we need to be hyper present and diligent about being in the moment. But then we have to realize that over a matter of weeks or months, when we start to get in a groove, especially if we start to experience some high performance and some success in a certain area, that it is a natural tendency in this kind of midterm. And this is something where, again, we're talking about maybe weeks or months. It's common for folks to get a little bit complacent and to put on the mental cruise control and just say to themselves, I'm on a roll right now. I'm just going to ride this momentum. I don't need to continue to grow and develop and learn new stuff because things are going pretty good for me right now. And many times this is not a conscious decision. It's in our unconscious wiring that we just put on that cruise control. So stress, we're looking at like day to day, even by the hour. This midterm stretch, we're looking over weeks and months to make sure that we're not getting complacent. There is a difference between being content and being complacent. I'm incredibly content with my life. I have a job that I love. I have 3 wonderful children that I have a great relationship with. I have great family and friends. Like, I'm in a good groove. I am very content with my life, but I'm not complacent. And I definitely don't think I've arrived. And I want to continue to level up, grow, evolve, and move towards self-actualization. So I did want to make that, discern the difference between the two. And then burnout is what happens when stress and stagnation accumulate over time. So now from a timeline standpoint, this is kind of, we have to look at, over years of working on our craft and years of pouring into ourselves. Are we starting to feel some of these signs of burnout? So it goes from the minute, the day-to-day, hour by hour, to kind of the midterm over the weeks and months. And then we also have to take a step back and take a look at the long-term effect and say, hey, I've been at this for 5 or 6 years now. Is it still giving me the same joy and fulfillment? Do I have the same level of fascination and curiosity that I had before? Do I feel like this work is purposeful and meaningful? And that's an evaluation that we need to do to make sure that we're not getting burned out.
Okay. And so when we're talking about sustain your game, your book there, so what are you finding is the biggest takeaway that people are getting from there?
The biggest takeaway is we have more control over these 3 areas than we tend to believe, whether we're talking about stress, stagnation, or burnout. The mistake that a lot of people make, and I lump myself in this category because it was one that I made for roughly 40 years, the 46 years I've been alive, and that is the belief that it is the outer world, that it is events, it's circumstances, it's what people say, it's what people do, that all of that stuff is causing our stress, stagnation, and burnout, that we are victims to circumstance and we are victims to what's going on in the world. And I used to ascribe to that, and it didn't get me anywhere. In fact, it left me feeling disempowered. It left me feeling pessimistic. It left me feeling empty and hollow. So what I've now adopted and wholeheartedly believe is it's not those things that cause our stress, stagnation, and burnout. It's our response to those things, or our perspective of those things, or usually our resistance to those things that's actually causing that. And when we can accept full responsibility and acknowledge the fact that, yeah, we don't control what's going on in the world around us, but we always control how we respond to that or how we choose to view it, or if we're going to resist it, I find that to be an incredibly empowering and liberating mindset, because now I'm no longer a victim to circumstance. I get to choose my response. Now, before any of your listeners think that I live in a fantasy land or I've lost my marbles, I'm not by any means suggesting that the things that go on in the world are to your liking. I'm not saying they're your preference. I'm not even saying that the things that go on in the world are inherently good. I mean, we see, tragedy after tragedy happen in the world. What I'm saying is we are the ones that choose how to respond to those things. And that means by default, stress, stagnation, and burnout are within our control. And that if you're experiencing them, and I say this with love and compassion and grace, I don't mean this to be a controversial statement, but if you're experiencing stress, stagnation, and burnout, it's self-induced and it's self-imposed. It's because of your resistance to what's going on as opposed to having a level of acceptance. But the beautiful part is you can change that in a moment's notice.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about the habits that you've developed to basically catch when you're triggered or catch when you're tempted to engage in whatever it might be.
Oh, I'm so glad you went in that direction. And what it all starts with is awareness. One thing I know for certain is we will never improve something we're unaware of, and we're never going to fix something we're oblivious to. So it starts with the very humble and vulnerable acknowledgement, which takes courage by all means, to acknowledge that I am the one inviting stress, stagnation, and burnout into my life because I am choosing to resist what is. And resisting what is completely futile. I mean, the world is going to do what the world is going to do. And you can either accept that that's what happened. Again, it doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean you condone it or support it. It just simply means this is something that happened. And this could be something as trivial as sitting in traffic, which most people consider an incredibly stressful scenario. And, I live in a suburb of Washington, D.C. So, we have one of the worst, bouts of traffic of anywhere in the world, probably outside of L.A. or New York City. And, coming to the realization that these cars that are in front of me that are in my way and preventing me from getting where I need to go, that's not being done to me. The cars are simply there and I can choose how to respond to the traffic. And this level of acceptance is absolutely the first step. So it starts with an awareness. You have to be aware of what you control and what you don't. And I love the word that you used, trigger. You have to be aware of what's triggering these stressful feelings, these different emotions that you're having. And one other clarification to make, I still feel every emotion and every feeling there is on the palette. This is not about resisting or suppressing or ignoring emotions. Like when I'm frustrated, I allow myself to be frustrated. If I'm angry or upset, I allow myself to feel that way. What I don't do is I don't let those feelings dictate my behavior. I don't let those feelings dictate how I treat others. Our emotions are designed to inform us. They're not designed to direct us. So there's nothing wrong with me being frustrated or angry at something that happened this morning. But if I were to bring that energy onto your show and be disrespectful or demeaning to you or to your audience because of something that happened to me earlier, that would be completely abhorrent and completely unacceptable. So I let myself feel how I'm going to feel, but I'm very thoughtful in how I choose to show up to the world and respond to those around me. And that's where these triggers come in. So I'm hyper aware of when I'm agitated or frustrated. First of all, I give myself permission to feel that way because I'm human. I'm not a robot. Second, I try to dig deeper and figure out, okay, what's really causing my frustration? Let's just pretend, and I know this is completely hypothetical because you seem like an incredibly charming and lovely guy, but let's just say that you said something, kind of off-putting to me, or you took a jab at me, and I feel myself getting angry at you. Well, I need to take a step back and go, it's not what you said that's actually triggering that anger. It's how that makes me feel. And what you said made me feel disrespected. And when I think back to some previous times in my life where I felt someone was disrespectful to me, it really made me feel less than. It made me feel really low. And as kind of a self-preservation tactic, then I needed to defend myself and protect my ego and kind of fight back. So what you said is completely innocuous, but it made me feel like I was being disrespected. But then even as I've come to grips with why I feel the way I feel, then I still can be thoughtful in my response. And do I want to jab back and say something demeaning and disrespectful to you? No, that's not the type of person that I want to be. So I'm going to be able to take however I'm feeling and then still have a thoughtful response. And this doesn't mean that I wouldn't stand up for myself. This doesn't mean that, I'm not going to guard my yard. It just simply means that however I choose to respond to you will be thoughtful and it will be my decision. It will not be a knee-jerk emotional reaction. And this process is daily. And I'll say that I have not mastered it yet. I don't know that I ever will, but I've made great progress and I like the path that I'm on. And the beautiful part is, and this will kind of circle back to habits. Habits are the things we repeatedly do. They're the things we do, unconsciously and consistently. And I'm working to make my response to life an actual habit, that I'm not just flying off the cuff every time something doesn't go my way, that I can actually be very thoughtful in that. And the beautiful part is, and I say this with a huge smile, the world gives us no shortage of opportunities to practice this. There is no shortage of things that happen on a daily basis that can frustrate us, irritate us, upset us. And I now look at those things as gifts. And even something like traffic, which still in my hard wiring causes my blood pressure to go up, causes me to sweat, causes me to white knuckle the steering wheel a little bit. But I then take a deep breath and go, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to practice patience and practice, lowering my own stress. I'm thankful for the opportunity to get a rep in today and to have practice at this. And it's not easy by any means. None of the stuff I shared is easy.
I like that. Thankful to get a rep in today. One of the things I say to some people is you can let your emotions control you, or you can decide to control your emotions. I would like to take that stress piece, though, and kind of drill it down into a specific business scenario. So let's say, and you can choose, I'll give you two you can choose from. Let's say I'm a business owner and I realize that I've got an area of my business that either is not my passion or it's kind of leveled out. And I really don't want to give up that part of the business, but it's not something I'm really interested in, and it's really not going to grow. And I've got this other thing that either is growing or no, let's make it more difficult. I've got this other thing that's more consistent with where I want to go with the business. And basically, if I remove my emotions, I'm 100% convinced that's the way I want to go, but I'm scared. I'm not going to give you two scenarios because I went too deep on this one. I'm scared. I'm scared to give away the revenue I have, even though I can probably sell it off and get a chunk of money. Maybe it won't be much, but I'm scared to gamble on this next one. Because what if that next one doesn't come through the way I want? And so this whole stress piece, so as a performance coach, how would you advise this company owner to address that stress and come to a decision one way or another? Because I've seen one set of leaders, by the way, who have punted this down the field for 5 years.
Oh, I'm sure. What a beautiful hypothetical. I love the direction that you went with this. So let's look at the first scenario. You know that there is an opportunity in your business for growth, but you readily acknowledge that that area is not something that interests you and or an area where you're particularly strong. So,
well, that's actually not growing. So that's not the growth area, but it is a standard revenue source I can rely on.
Okay. All right. I was given advice when I was in my teens that I still carry with me to this day. And that is, find something you love to do, find something you're really good at, and find where those two things intersect. And that is going to be your strength zone. And anytime you can, spend time investing in your strength zone, you will not only perform at a higher level, but you'll also have more joy and fulfillment while you're doing it. So, it's not and I'm certainly not implying that every single moment of my day is puppy dogs and ice cream, but for the most part, most of what I get to do every single day of my life involves something I'm passionate about and something I'm pretty good at. And anything outside of that circle, I delegate to someone else, or I bring on someone else on my team to handle that for me. And the beautiful part is I bring on people that area of expertise is within their strength zone. It's what they love to do and what they're pretty good at. So what I would say is, if you see this can be a consistent revenue source for your business, but you know that you don't really enjoy it and aren't very good at it, and that anytime you would spend personally in that area of your business, you will be outside of your strength zone, then I would look to either bring in a partner or promote somebody from within, or someone that can lead that area up. And the qualifications would be, is this an area that you're passionate about? And is this an area that you have some natural affinity or talent for? And that's what building a team is all about. That if I know that I can outsource, or delegate this one area to you, and you are in your strength zone, then I can focus on what's in my strength zone, and simultaneously we can continue to grow and improve. So from that standpoint, that is what I would at least have them explore. And ultimately, when I'm working with someone. Oh,
it's kind of funny because I'm thinking, you mentioned you worked with Kevin Durant, and I'm a Warriors fan, and that's what the Warriors did when they brought on Durant.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely.
Yeah. But we need somebody to distract from Curry, so Curry can do his thing.
You're 100% right. And even, using that basketball analogy, the best coaches that I've ever been around, the best head coaches, they hire assistant coaches that have a distinct strength zone that is different from theirs. So if I'm a head coach and I can acknowledge that I'm brilliant with X's and O's and strategy, but maybe I'm not the most charismatic recruiter, and I'm thinking in the college game at present, then I want to bring on an assistant that is wonderful at recruiting. Or it might be the opposite. I might be able to get any player I want, but the actual X's and O's of basketball, are decent, but they're not my area of expertise. Then I want to make sure I have an X's and O's tactician on my staff. And the best staffs that I've ever been around, whether it's Steve Kerr and the Warriors or somebody at the college level, their staff together is incredibly well-rounded because each person has a specialty area or an area of expertise that fits in like a jigsaw puzzle with everybody else. And I think that a CEO or an entrepreneur running a business should view it the exact same way. I know that when you're in the startup phase and you're just getting it off the ground, you often have to wear every hat and do everything together. I mean, you're doing R&D, you're doing sales, you're doing, marketing, you're doing a little bit of everything. But once you reach a certain point where you have enough revenue that you can start to delegate that to some other people, it'll absolutely make your life so much more fluid.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So, as we close this out, what would be, I want you to tell people, how to find out more about what you're doing. Obviously you've got the two books but what advice would you give them moving forward into this, the economy is getting kind of rocky and they've got to make some tough decisions. And you mentioned this whole thing of stress, stagnation, and burnout. They don't want to get caught in any three of those with the economy we're going into. What advice do you have from them, and where can they go to learn more?
My advice for them is, obviously, for most businesses and most industries, a thriving economy would be everyone's preference. I mean, it's certainly my preference as a keynote speaker and an author. But once again, when your preferences aren't met or things happen outside of your control that go against what you'd like to see happen, you can either resist that, which is futile, which is only going to increase your stress, stagnation, and burnout, or you can learn to accept it and come up with a thoughtful and intentional and purposeful response that still allows you to move forward. So what I would say is don't spend too much of your emotional currency worrying about how the economy is doing. Instead, focus on making sure you are going above and beyond to deliver for your customers and your clients. Make sure that your team is a high performing team and you've created an amazing culture. Doing those things will help you weather the times when the economy is not going very well. So have this mindset of extreme ownership and that everything starts with you, and do the best that you can with what you have wherever you are. And that's very, very broad advice, and certainly easy for me to say, but not easy for anybody to do. And there's always going to be a gap, between what's basic in principle and what we can actually implement and execute, because basic and easy are not synonyms. Everything I've shared with you so far has been incredibly basic. These are fundamental principles. Not a single thing that I've shared with you so far is actually easy to do. This stuff is really challenging. So just know that going into it, that it's going to be hard. And certainly if I can help anyone along the way, my website is alansteinjr.com. I have a supplemental site at strongerteam.com. My main area of focus is on keynotes and workshops. The books, Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, kind of supplement that. But then I do some one-on-one coaching, and I have an online course, and I do a few other things to hopefully help reinforce these principles. And I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on all of the major social platforms. So if anyone wants to keep this discussion going or ask a question or even challenge anything that I shared, I always welcome that. Just shoot me a DM on Instagram at Alan Stein Jr. or hit me up on LinkedIn, and I would love to keep the dialogue going.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Alan. I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been great.
My pleasure. Thank you.